Alleluia, Christ is risen. The Lord is risen indeed. Alleluia. Good morning, friends, from Father Andy at St. Mary's in the Hills. It is Easter morning and the birds are singing outside, and it is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. This is my Easter message for you. We won't be holding an online service this morning. I invite you to go check out the National Cathedral service. But I wanted to bring you an Easter message this morning. I remember when I was growing up and in Easters that I've seen and lived through Easters past, I think of brass quintets and Easter hats and Easter clothes and candy, candy, candy. You know, we celebrate with bell choirs and new choral anthems, with Easter baskets and and Easter lilies. We celebrate Easter with a lot of pageantry. And why shouldn't we? After all, the collect for Easter Sunday says that through Jesus, God overcame death and opened to us the way of everlasting life. So of course we mark this day with joy and celebration. We sing our Alleluias because death no longer holds dominion. And this year we can't do all of that. And I'm, like many of you, saddened by that fact. I miss the celebration. I miss the pageantry. I miss the joy and singing together to mark the resurrection of Christ. I miss our common acclamation, Alleluia, Christ is risen, the Lord is risen indeed, Alleluia. But keeping Easter in this way, in our homes and distant from one another, there's something in keeping it this way that helps us to understand something about Easter that we might not have understood before. Helps me to understand something about Easter that I might not have understood before. Something like an unkept secret, or at least something true about Easter nevertheless. That Easter morning didn't actually come with trumpet fare and accolades, with angelic choirs booming and bursting. It arrived like the dawning sun, slowly, patiently, persistently. Easter came quietly. Christ rose with a quiet power, like a gentle juggernaut. Even in being raised the firstfruits from the dead, Jesus shows the immensity shows the utter humility that is a reflection of a mercy equal to the immensity of God. A mercy equal to the immensity of God is a phrase by Jeremy Taylor, who was a 17th century Anglican divine. And this year I learned this phrase from the brilliant and talented rector of Christ Church Detroit, who also happens to be my wife. And she used this passage in her Maundy Thursday reflection, where Jesus is washing the feet of the disciples, and Taylor says, and he chose to wash their feet rather than their head, that he might have the opportunity of a more humble posture and a more apt signification of his charity. Thus God lays everything aside that he may serve his servants. Heaven stoops to earth, and one abyss calls upon another, and the miseries of man, which were next to infinite, are excelled by a mercy equal to the immensity of God. So from Maundy Thursday, right through Good Friday and Holy Saturday, Jesus has shown this humility. And we are tempted to think that Easter Easter morning is when all of that changes, but it doesn't change. Easter came quietly because that is how human hearts change from hearts of stone to hearts of flesh, to real, beating hearts of flesh. That was one of our readings from the vigil last night, from Ezekiel, and where God says, "And I will take away your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh." We often think of, and that seems backwards, we often think of stone as enduring. Stone is strong. Stone is formidable. Flesh is weak. It's pliant. It's much more vulnerable. But that is exactly how we were created to be. Not impenetrable, merely outlasting everything else, but pliable, resilient, able to be wounded just like God, and therefore capable of a mercy and a love equal to the immensity of God. And so not only did Jesus wash his disciples' feet out of a more humble posture, but even in his rising again, he withheld the immensity of his glory so that we might be moved not by the strength of stone, but by the joy of love and the joy of life. Easter came quietly. All of Jesus' disciples were in disarray, dispersed to their own homes, afraid of what or who might be hunting them. Easter came not with a crash and a perceptible shaking of the foundations, but on the winds of gossip, rumors, hearsay, and the reports of brave, faithful women who could not contain their joyful amazement. Easter came in the midst of grief, bewilderment, and panic, when nothing seemed to make sense any longer. The risen Jesus didn't overpower the disciples' sadness and pain and fear. That's not how joy works. That's not how love works. That's not how hearts of stone are turned to hearts of flesh. The living Jesus, Lord of all creation, stepped back into the world that crucified him with light feet. Slowly, patiently, persistently. Jesus stepped back into a world of turmoil and spoke ever so gently. I wonder, did he whisper it? Do not be afraid. See, I was dead, but I am alive. See, there really is nothing greater or more enduring than God's abundant life. See, I am God's heart open toward you. Do not be afraid. And that is how Easter is for us this year too. Like the bird song of the morning or the first grounding tremor of a symphony, like the gentle dawn itself. In our fear and panic and grief and bewilderment, Jesus rises quietly, humbly, to take away our hearts of stone and create in us hearts of flesh, because only hearts of flesh can receive joy equal to the immensity of God. May we open our hearts to receive our humble Christ of glory, to accept God's heart turned toward us. May we have the courage to find Christ alive in and beyond our world, these bodies, our homes, and these times, these perilous times. And on this Easter day, in keeping this Easter feast in our hearts of flesh and in our homes, may we find that Easter has by no means been canceled. But may we see rather that Easter comes quietly to heal us, to enliven us, to bring us back from the dead, so that we may remember how to sing our lives from humble glory into God's humble glory. I invite you, therefore, to imitate the disciples that first Easter morning, spread hearsay of love unknown. Spread rumors of a mercy and a wonder equal to the immensity of God. Let yourselves be captivated by this thing that God has done, amazed by the victory of God's life, infected with tears of joy and delight in the impossible. That Alleluia, Christ is risen. The Lord is risen indeed. Alleluia.